Folks, Khorne here, and today I'll be discussing what I believe Warhammer 3 needs to change to enhance the overall experience. I won't delve into pricing details, as I lack in-depth knowledge regarding the cost of creating new content. I typically spend very little on games, and only invest in those I truly enjoy. In the past 3 years I've purchased as many games, and one of them was Warhammer 3. Up to this point I've only disliked one DLC, and that was the Shadows of Change. My gripe with it wasn't primarily about the significant price increase and lack of content, but rather the quality of the content itself. Shadows of Change didn't contribute positively to the game. The promised race updates actually resulted in downgrading mechanics, failing to improve the game in any meaningful way. What I'm getting at is that I wouldn't mind the price increase if the content added genuine value to the game instead of it feeling like a mere pay-to-win strategy. The foremost need in the game is quality of life improvements, addressing numerous lingering issues present since the game's launch, as well as those that originated in Warhammer 2, is essential, and above all is giving you a reason to play into the later stages of your campaigns. In Warhammer 2, late game enjoyment stemmed from stacking bonuses and conquering rival factions, both of which have been decreased or outright removed in the game. While Belegar's grudge was fixed, other issues persist, including unit tags, heroes lacking sufficient skill options, pathing problems, and a subpar AI. These seemingly minor issues accumulate, diminishing the desire to replay the game. The current endgame crisis, intended to enhance replayability, unfortunately mirrors bullet sponges in shooter-type games. Rather than genuinely changing the enemy, it simply bestows them with an excessive amount of hit points, making them a chore to eliminate. The thing is though, Warhammer 3 doesn't need this, as it is a game that has so much content that you wouldn't be able to get through it all without spending thousands of hours in it. This is something I don't understand how the developers don't realize. The biggest thing the game needs is a reason to keep playing. As I said, Warhammer 2 had that, but I don't think implementing it the same way would work for Warhammer 3. Warhammer 3 is fundamentally different than 2, and as such I don't think that bringing back the AI cheats and having the AI confederate everything how it used to will increase the challenge of the game or make people want to play it more. Warhammer 3 has the potential to provide an extraordinary RPG experience, and its further development should be directed towards that goal. Adding more meaningful skill options, offering useful traits, resolving issues related to unit tags, improving item scaling, overhauling lackluster defeated legendary lord traits, and introducing additional global bonuses are some key areas that demand attention. But the biggest thing that Warhammer 3 needs is, in my opinion, theme to your campaigns, and the best way to implement this would be through an actually good endgame crisis. One that will add more depth to your campaigns than just spawning 20 armies out of thin air. They should be more appropriate to the faction you are playing, should give you a goal to strive for, and give you a reward for completing it. I have already made a video on how I think the endgame crisis should look like, but I think it's time to update it. My thoughts on the endgame crisis is one that grows over time and eventually becomes a major threat to the player. I have ideas for 3 different crises that would hopefully deliver a more engaging experience. I have ideas for a chaos endgame crisis, a neutral one, and an order one. Each crisis would trigger depending on how your race is aligned. For example, if you're playing the Lizardmen, you would get either a chaos endgame crisis or a neutral one. Instead of having a percentage slider, I think that the endgame crisis should be based on just difficulty levels you choose, which would influence when it would spawn. So if you put it on easy, the crisis would spawn after 100 turns. But if you put it on legendary, it would spawn much sooner. It should also spawn dependent on your faction's strength and the amount of territory you conquered. So if your campaign is going well, it will spawn sooner to match you. For the chaos crisis, my vision is to have 5 different chaos portals scattered across the map, each aligned with a specific chaos god, 4 for each of the chaos gods and 1 for undivided. When the crisis is triggered, all warriors of chaos and demon factions would have their lords teleported to their respective portals and given armies that best represent their alignment status as demon or mortal. For example, Skabrand would receive a demon army, while Valkia would command a mortal army. Each Chaos God would grant their aligned armies special gifts to aid them in battle. Nurgle's armies could gain increased health and melee defense. Slaaneshi armies could gain increased speed and melee attack bonuses. Khorne's armies could get weapon strength and armor. Tzeentch's armies could get barrier and missile strength enhancement. And Undivided would receive ward save. The territories these factions held would be transformed into Chaos Rifts. From these rifts, appropriate armies would spawn periodically. All the legendary lords involved in the crisis should have significant auto-resolve bonuses against other AI factions, and if they were ever defeated, they would respawn at the main portal after several turns. However, the primary goal of the Chaos Forces wouldn't be to directly attack the player. Instead, their focus would be on the opposing Chaos Gods. For example, Slaanesh-aligned armies would target Khorne, while Tzeentch-aligned armies would target Nurgle. Only the Undivided forces would actively move towards the player and prioritize eliminating other factions along the way. The Chaos Forces wouldn't be able to occupy territories. Instead, they would raise them and create Chaos Rifts that periodically spawn low-tier demon armies. These rifts would prevent settlements in the province from being occupied until it is closed. Your main objective as the player would be to reach and close the main Chaos Portal before the map becomes overrun with demon armies and the situation becomes overwhelming. Each main portal closure should be a unique and challenging experience, resembling survival battles rather than generic encounters. Closing a portal could offer tempting rewards, such as gaining the same buffs as the Chaos God aligned with that portal, only with some drawbacks. However, choosing opposing gods' boons could result in additional negatives. It's important to note that the Chaos Forces themselves would also be vying for control of the portals. If an opposing Chaos faction manages to reach another god's portal first, they would gain the associated bonuses and witness the destruction of their opposition. For example, if Khorne forces reach the Slaaneshi portal, they would close it and gain Slaaneshi speed and melee attack buffs. For the Order crisis, my concept involves the major Order factions forming a unified alliance, with each unique alliance granting buffs to their armies based on the participating factions. Here are some examples. Each Dwarf faction in the alliance would provide a certain amount of armor and melee defense bonuses. Each Empire faction would contribute weapon strength and leadership. Each High Elf faction missile strength and winds of magic mastery. Each Kislev faction ward save. Each Cathayan faction extended range for missile units, and so on. The primary goal of this alliance would be to eradicate the player. Every faction in the alliance would constantly be sending armies to challenge and attack you. Each capital city of the participating factions' races would become a stronghold, where survival battles similar to the Chaos Portals would take place. To overcome this crisis, you would need to either eliminate each faction one by one, or win the decisive battle at their race's capital city. Winning the battle at the capital would result in all factions from that race being isolated from the alliance, making them easier targets. Additionally, each capital battle won should grant a unique bonus to your faction, similar to how Noska gains unique technologies for capturing different race capitals. The Order crisis would create a tense and challenging endgame experience where you must face a united front of major Order factions. By strategically defeating their armies and capturing their capital cities, you can weaken the alliance and gain valuable advantages for your own faction. For the neutral crisis, I envision a vastly improved implementation of the War Endgame crisis. Currently, the biggest war feels underwhelming, with fewer armies compared to other endgame crises. To address this, I propose a more overwhelming and relentless green tide. In the new system, armies would spawn with full wars, making them numerous and formidable. They would be capable of bringing 60 units onto the battlefield, or a minimum of 40 if you do not control large armies. The aim is to create a sense of being engulfed by the green tide, where no matter how many greenskins you defeat, more will keep on coming. But rather than these armies just being late game doomstacks, they should consist of a mix of low tier and high tier units, similar to the randomness of wars in the game currently. This variation in unit composition would make each encounter with the greenskins unique and feel less painful and more enjoyable. To make the crisis even more threatening, the greenskin factions should receive initial cheats at the start of the campaign, allowing them to rapidly expand across the map. When the endgame crisis triggers, all territories they conquered would turn into ruins, each region spawning an additional army for the greenskins. Furthermore, for each new territory they raise, they would spawn more armies. Legendary lords would have high tier armies, each with a force tailored to their own character, along with 2 war armies attached. These legendary lords would remain behind the advancing forces of greenskin armies. To overcome the neutral crisis, players would need to either hold their position against the unyielding green tide and prevent further territory capture, or venture into the heart of the greenskin horde and defeat their legendary lords. Each greenskin faction should receive unique buffs to reflect their strengths. For example, Grimgo's faction could gain armor and armor-piercing weapon damage bonuses. Skarsnik's faction might receive stalk and speed. Grom's faction could have increased mass and regeneration buffs. Wilzak's faction could obtain ward save, and Azag's faction might grant his units the undead trait with the hunger. If players manage to overcome the greenskin crisis, they would gain access to defeated factions' bonuses. Additionally, the greenskins would be battling each other, vying for supremacy to inherit the defeated factions' buffs. Just imagine delaying any of these crises. It would be a nightmare to deal with in the later stages of the campaign. But if you manage to deal with them early, you can get some neat bonuses. But is any of this feasible? I don't know. What I do know is that any endgame crisis that has more theme and engagement to it and is not just 20 armies spawning out of thin air will be better. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe for future content. If you have any ideas of your own and want to share them, do so in the comments. Thank you for watching, and until next time.